Not a straight line upward, not a fairy tale frozen at its happiest frame, but a human life unfolding in chapters that include both triumph and cost. It would be easy to reduce her story to inspiration, the overlooked woman who shocked the world. But inspiration without complexity turns people into symbols, and symbols are easier to celebrate than to understand. Susan Boyle is not a symbol. She is a woman who processed the world differently, who endured mockery without becoming cruel, who experienced global fame without surrendering her identity, and who continues to live in the same town where she was. Once dismissed, she did not move to Los Angeles. She did not build a mansion behind gates. She did not chase reinvention. She renovated her childhood home. She shops locally. She attends church. She protects her routines. She sings when she chooses to sing. And in that, there is a quiet defiance, more radical than rebellion. In a culture that demands constant escalation, more visibility, more relevance, more spectacle, she chose steadiness. In an industry that rewards transformation, she chose continuity. The real price of being seen is not just scrutiny, it is exposure. The world does not only applaud, it evaluates. Dissects. It decides what parts of you are marketable and which are inconvenient. Susan learned publicly and painfully how quickly affection can turn into analysis. She learned that viral love can coexist with tabloid skepticism. She learned that applause does not eliminate loneliness. But she also learned something else. That her voice did not belong to the people who laughed at her, nor to the executives who signed her, nor even to the millions who bought her albums. It belonged to her. It always had. For 47 years she sang. Without a global audience, the absence of recognition did not erase the gift. The presence of recognition did not define it. That is the quiet truth beneath the spectacle. Talent is not created by attention. It is revealed by it. When people revisit that audition clip today, they often focus on the judge's expressions, the raised eyebrows, the smirks that dissolve into awe. But the more revealing image is Susan herself standing center stage before the first note. She is not defensive. She is not apologetic. She is simply there. A woman in a gold dress, holding on to a dream that outlived humiliation, rejection, and time. She did not know, in that moment, that the world was about to change its mind. She only knew she had promised her mother she would try. That may be the most powerful part of the story. Not the 100 million views, not the chart-topping albums, not the standing ovations at palaces and arenas. A promise kept. A train taken. Alone to Glasgow. A decision not to put the application form back in the drawer. There are countless people living quiet lives in small towns, carrying gifts that do not fit the current template. Voices that do not match the industry's preferred packaging. Dreams delayed by responsibility, by difference, by the simple logistics of survival. Susan's story does not guarantee that every one of those voices will be discovered, but it does dismantle the assumption that they cannot be. She spent nearly 5 decades being underestimated. When her moment came, she was ready. Not because she had been prepared by fame, but because she had been prepared by endurance. Today, she is older. The tours are fewer. The pace is gentler. The headlines are less frequent. But the essential elements remain. The house in Blackburn, the church. Community, the cats, the routines, the voice. Not untouched by time, but still unmistakably hers. Some triumphs are loud. They arrive with fireworks and declarations. Others are quiet and cumulative. They look like staying. I like returning home. I like choosing not to become a caricature of your own success. Susan Boyle's life is not a fairy tale that began in obscurity and ended in glittering perfection. It is something rarer and more durable. It is the story of a woman who was overlooked, who was finally heard, and who, after the world finished reacting, continued steadily, honestly, and entirely as herself. And that, more than any record broken or audience stunned into silence, is what makes her unforgettable. In 9 days, a grainy online video was watched 100 million times. Not a trailer, not a major label music video, not the carefully engineered launch of a global pop star. but a clip of a 47-year-old woman from a village most people had never heard of singing in front of a crowd that had already decided she was a joke before she opened her mouth. There is a kind of talent the entertainment industry is almost designed not to find too old, too unconventional, too different, too far outside the categories that make people comfortable. For decades, one woman embodied every reason the world gives itself to ignore someone. When she was finally heard, she broke records that had stood for years. What happened after nearly broke her? How does someone spend 47 years invisible and then, in 30 seconds, become impossible to ignore? What does the world owe a person it spent a lifetime underestimating? And what is the real price of finally being seen? To understand that, you have to go back to a small Scottish town, a difficult childhood and 47 years of silence that made one voice unforgettable. In Blackburn, West Lothian, Scotland, where the winters are long and ambition often stays quiet, Susan Magdalene Boyle was born on April 1st, 1961, the youngest of 10 children. The birth was difficult. Oxygen deprivation left doctors describing her condition as minor brain damage, a label that followed her through classrooms and relationships, shaping how people saw her long before she understood herself. She struggled in school, processed information differently, moved through the world at a rhythm others found strange. Children can be merciless, and they were. The nickname Susie Simple echoed through hallways and playgrounds not to describe her, but to diminish her. Hair pulled, games denied, laughter at her expense, the small daily humiliations that carved deep marks over time. 2. Things kept her from disappearing into that cruelty. The first was music. From childhood she could sing not just adequately, but beautifully. With a natural clarity, untouched by the confusion that clouded other areas of her life, she sang in church, at home, alone in her bedroom, as though the sound itself was companionship. Music did not judge her, did not label her, it simply received her. The second anchor was her mother, Bridget, practical, deeply faithful, and unwavering in her belief. Bridget saw in her youngest daughter not limitation but promise. She encouraged Susan to perform locally, sat in front rows at small talent shows, and insisted gently but persistently that her voice was a gift. Those early stages were humble: church halls, community centers, pub nights where few listened closely. Susan entered local contests, sometimes placing well, sometimes not. She tried to step beyond Blackburn, recording a demo in 1999 and entering competitions, but rejection came quietly and repeatedly. Not dramatic failure, just the steady dismissal of someone who didn't fit the industry's image. Too plain, too old, too unconventional. Each attempt ended with her returning home to Blackburn and to her mother. After her father's death in 1997, Susan became Bridget's primary caregiver. While the world moved forward, she stayed. When Bridget died in 2007, at 91, Susan was 46, alone for the first time, living in the same council house with her cat. Pebbles and a voice that still hadn't found its stage. In 2009, she auditioned for Britain's Got Talent. She almost didn't go. She had promised her mother she would try, and promises made to the dead can feel heavier than those made to the living. She traveled alone to Glasgow in a gold-laced dress, standing backstage among younger, polished contestants who barely noticed her. In her pre-audition interview, she said she was 47, lived with her cat, had never been kissed, and wanted to be as successful as Elaine Page. She said it without irony, unaware that many were already framing her as comic relief. When she stepped onto the stage, the audience reacted instantly: smirks, raised eyebrows, quiet laughter. She announced she would sing "I Dreamed a Dream" from Les Miserables. More laughter. Then the music began. She opened her mouth. But what happened next was more than beautiful singing. It was a collective recalibration. In seconds, assumptions shattered. Laughter stopped. Expressions changed. By the final note, the audience was on its feet, many in tears. Simon Cowell later called it the biggest surprise he had ever had on the show. The clip went online. Within 9 days, 100 million people had watched it. Susan returned to Blackburn, stunned as the world descended. Fame that comes slowly allows. Armor to form. She had 9 days. Media appearances, interviews, record label meetings, the full machinery of celebrity arrived at once. She moved through it with disarming authenticity, saying what she thought, laughing when she felt like it. Some coverage celebrated her, some probed for weakness. As the competition progressed, the pressure intensified. She finished second too, the dance group diversity. In the hours after the final, overwhelmed and exhausted, she was admitted to a private clinic for rest and recovery. There she received a diagnosis that reframed her life: Asperger's syndrome, a form of autism. What had been labeled brain damage at birth was, in fact, a neurodevelopmental difference that explained decades of social difficulty and misunderstanding. For Susan, the diagnosis was relief. "I knew there was something," she said. "Just didn't know what it was." It gave her language for her experience. She returned home and quietly went back to work. Her debut album, I Dreamed a Dream, released in November 2009, became the fastest-selling debut album by a female artist. In UK chart history at the time, it topped charts in the UK and US and became the best-selling album of the year in both countries. The success wasn't industry generosity, it was public choice. Millions connected with her authenticity. More albums followed the gift. Someone to Watch Over Me, Standing Ovation, Hope, A Wonderful World, each reinforcing that she was not a viral moment, but a sustained artist. She toured globally, performed for the British royal family and at major events, standing on stages far removed from the church halls of Blackburn, yet singing with the same unadorned sincerity. The cost, however, was real. Touring challenged. Her sensory limits, airports, crowds, constant stimulation, these required careful management. She was later diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, adding another layer of discipline to her life. She remained single, speaking honestly about having wanted love, but not having found it. Fame brought admirers, but not necessarily connection. She returned repeatedly to Blackburn, choosing to remain in her renovated council house. "It's my home," she said simply. She kept her routines, her church, her cats. She chose familiarity over spectacle. Over time, her voice deepened, but did not fade. Live performances revealed a quiet strength, not vocal gymnastics, but purity and emotional clarity. She sang melodies as written, trusting their power without embellishment. That simplicity became her signature. She was not chasing trends. She was singing truth. Today, she still lives in Blackburn. She manages her health, protects her routines, records, and performs selectively. She is recognized, photographed, approached by strangers who feel they know her. She responds warmly, then returns home. Her story is often framed as one of talent finally recognized, and that is true. But it is also a story of difference, misunderstood, of systems not built for certain minds, of resilience without bitterness. She lost things: a childhood free from ridicule, an earlier diagnosis, the partnership she once hoped for. Not pretend those losses vanished in applause. Her legacy is not just records or viral fame. It is the courage of remaining oneself in an industry built on reinvention. She was told she was not enough, not young enough, not polished enough, not conventional enough. She walked onto that stage anyway, carrying 47 years of being overlooked. And when the world finally looked, she did not become someone else to keep its attention. She stayed exactly who she had always been. In doing so, she proved that authenticity, even delayed, is powerful. One note at a time, one album at a time, one quiet year in Blackburn at a time. She showed that being true was not only enough, it was everything. And perhaps that is the part of her story that lingers long after the statistics fade. Viral. Numbers age. Chart records are broken. New voices arrive, louder, younger, engineered for a different moment. But what happened in that auditorium in Glasgow in 2009 continues to circulate, not because it was surprising, but because it was corrective. It forced millions of people to confront how quickly they judge, how casually they dismiss, how confidently they assume they can measure a person in seconds. Susan did not argue with the world. She did not scold it for laughing. She did not reinvent herself to satisfy it. She simply sang. In the years since, she has experienced setbacks that never made the same headlines as her rise. In 2022, she suffered a minor stroke that temporarily affected her speech and mobility. For someone whose identity is so closely tied to her voice, it was a frightening interruption. Recovery required patience, therapy, and once again the quiet discipline that has defined her entire life. In 2023, she returned to the Britain's Got Talent stage for a special performance, revealing publicly for the first time what she had endured. The moment was not framed as tragedy. It was framed as continuation. She sang again, not to prove anything, but because singing is who she is. There is something profoundly instructive in that. Rhythm, rise, overwhelm, diagnosis, success, loneliness, illness, return.